Now, if you're in the market for a new graphics card and you have about a $200 to $250 budget, you might be wondering on whether to get the GTX 960 or to take a look at the R9 380 that just came out very recently. And in this video, we're going to be specifically doing a comparison between the two so we can determine which card gives you the most bang for your dollar. So specifically, we're going to be doing some benchmarking and determining which card is more efficient in terms of power and cooling. And of course, taking a look at some of our gaming benchmark scenarios that we've done in 3 different resolutions. So let's go ahead and see which card is best and which card is right for you. So we've already done a comparison against the GTX 970 compared to the R9 380, but again, as most of you guys pointed out, there is a pretty big price difference between the two, sometimes over $100. So in this video, it's more representative, but I just want to see how the new 380 compared against the 970, and definitely check out that video if you haven't already and if you're interested in that topic. But here, it's going to be more relatable in terms of price point, since the GTX 960 is just around the same price point as the R9 380. So the first thing that we're going to take a look at is the overall specification of both cards. We'll start with our Gigabyte version of the GTX 960. Its base clock is clocked around 1266 megahertz. You can obviously overclock it. The boost clock is 1329 megahertz. And in terms of the CUDA cores, we have 1024 CUDA cores. Looking at the memory specifications, we have 2 gigabytes of VRAM in this card, clocked around 7000 megahertz, and we have 128-bit memory bandwidth. And in terms of connectivity, it's pretty standard for most of the GTX or 900 series cards out there. So a 3 DisplayPort connection, 1 HDMI 2.0 connection, and 2 dual-link DVI connections. Now we have the MSI version of the R9 380. So its stock clock is around 1000 megahertz, and it can be stably overclocked to about 1135 megahertz. We have 1792 stream processors, and looking at the RAM, you can either get a 2 gigabyte card or a 4 gigabyte card. Both cards are clocked around 1400 megahertz in terms of their memory clock speed, but you can overclock it to 1500 fairly stably. And memory bandwidth, we actually have twice the bandwidth as the 960 at around 256 bits. In terms of the ports and connectivity options, it doesn't have as much as our GTX 960, so just 1 DisplayPort 1.2 connection and 1 HDMI 1.4 spec. So I reached out to somebody at AMD and asked them why they didn't put HDMI 2.0, and they said if people want to do 4K at 60 hertz refresh rate, they're going to have to use the DisplayPort connection. So that's kind of upsetting, especially for people that are going to use TVs as monitors. I've done videos in the past, and there's a big competitive edge and quite a big market for a lot of people using 4K televisions as monitors, and unfortunately they don't have DisplayPort connection. So that may force you guys to go with a 900 series graphics card, because most of them can do a 60 hertz refresh rate 4K resolution through the HDMI. Now in terms of the cooling solutions, both are using the stock cooling configuration. We have the MSI Zero Frozer cooler, which is an excellent cooler that most of the 300 series graphics card from MSI are using. You have a dual 94mm fan configuration that's very efficient in terms of power and overall cooling. Our GTX 960 is using Gigabyte's triple fan configuration, which is even better in terms of acoustics and thermal performance. Now at idle or at minimum load, both cards can actually turn off the fan, so they're pretty much 0 decibels. They're very quiet. But once you're start to game and do anything that's GPU intensive, you're going to start to see that both of them are pretty much identical in terms of their noise output. Both get around 37 to 36 decibels based on my test. So pretty much identical in terms of noise. In terms of the TDP and thermal performance, you're looking at a kind of a different story. The Gigabyte card does an excellent job of thermal heat dissipation. At idle, it basically is very cool at 32 degrees C, 36 degrees Celsius on our 380, and at load, basically same story over here. The G1 card is just a bit cooler at 68 degrees C versus 73 degrees C on the 380. So generally speaking, you might have a little bit more overclocking room on the 960. We haven't really pushed too much on both of them cards, so both run fairly stably and fairly cool. Now in terms of the power consumption and power efficiency, we're basically going to take a look at the entire system power consumption. We can take a look at the specs specs right on the screen, and you can also check out the link for more detailed breakdown of the gaming rig that we're testing out. But basically at idle, both cards are fairly similar in terms of power consumption, 112 watts on the 960 and about 111 watts on the 380. And once you start loading them up, there's about a 3 to 4 watt average difference when you start loading up their GPUs. Again, we use Firmark to basically load them up to 100%, but when you're gaming, the difference is going to be more diluted. So generally speaking, not a big deal when it comes to power consumption between the two. Now let's finally get into the meat of this comparison, and let's talk about the gaming performance. We've basically are going to test out both graphics card in the same exact gaming rig. We haven't overclocked them to an extreme amount. They're basically running stock configuration in terms of clock speeds, so we have a good side-by-side baseline comparison. And we're going to be testing out 5 different games, and each game is going to be tested out at 3 different resolutions, including 1920 by 1080, 2560 by 1440, and 3840 by 2160. So we have a good idea on how both of them can do at different resolutions. So without any further ado, let's get right into this. Now, after viewing the results, you can see that in most cases, the R9 380 is the better GPU. In most titles, it's going to outperform the GTX 960. The only exception was GTA 5. That's mostly driver related, and as we get more updated drivers, because the card is so new, you're going to have some of these performance issues, but eventually it'll be fully optimized for most of your mainstream titles. But even at this point, in most games, it outperforms the GTX 960, and that's what most people care about. In terms of average frames per second, if you want a faster card, looks like the 380 is faster than the GTX 960. But other than that, guys, that's really it. Make sure to leave a comment down below letting me know what you guys think of the video and which card you guys would specifically pick. Give us a thumbs up if this video helped you out in any way, and definitely check out the links down below for more information about each card. But really, that's really it. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you later. Take care.